Today, we're talking about an ordinary looking dresser that has a truly sinister history behind it. It's responsible for generations of deaths, and we're going to look at why that is now. So, welcome if you're new, welcome back if you've been here before. Take a seat, relax, and let's dive into this chilling case. Okay, so our time period is the 1840s, and the origins of the place that we're in is Kentucky, America, Frankfurt. So, unfortunately, we are in a time period of where slavery was actually a thing, and this all stems from the Cooley family. So Jacob Cooley was a large plantation owner and his workers were slaves that were mistreated and beaten. Jacob was considered cruel and evil. The story begins, however, when Mr. Cooley found out his wife was pregnant. He had wanted a chest of drawers crafted for his newborn child, so to achieve this, he ordered a slave to do so. They were called Hosea. Now, Hosea was a talented, skilled carpenter. As a slave, he would have to comply, and he ended up doing so. So, I'm going to put a picture up on screen now, and to me and many of you out there, we can all agree that this piece of furniture is actually lovely. It's really nice to look at, and it has a lot of detail in it. So, what could possibly be the problem? Well, Mr. Cooley wasn't satisfied with the end result. Mr. Cooley had beaten Hosea to death in an angered fit of rage. Now, I just want to say I'm so glad that these times have changed. This is honestly just disgusting. Now, Hosea's murder did not go well with his fellow community. Among his community was a conjureman, a man who had learned spells and curses in his homeland before being in America, so they would not allow the treatment of Hosea to go unpunished. A group of slaves had actually managed to hide the chest away long enough before Mr. Cooley would notice it had even disappeared, and I believe they did this around night time. So it's said that dried owl's blood was sprinkled over the chest while chanting, and this is how they placed the curse on the dresser. The curse in particular that was placed was actually to cause death towards future generations of the Cooley family. So the chest was returned in the exact same place that Mr. Cooley left it, and he had no idea what just happened to that piece of furniture. Now, here's something to strike a nerve. Cooley did not like the chest, but he still placed it in his unborn baby's room. How hideous and sinister is that? However, time would go by of the pregnancy and Mr. Cooley became the father of a new baby boy. However, disaster struck within just several days later of the birth. The newborn baby had died. This is where the chest's curse begins. Now, exact details on the newborn baby's death are unknown, but disaster after disaster after disaster kept on emerging around the family. On record, 16 people are reported to have died from the curse. So let's have a look at these accounts now. Also, disclaimer, as usual, this is a folklore sort of region, so not all information could be proved or deemed reliable or correct. There are some articles that I've read that have changed the family's names completely, which is very confusing, which is why I'm sticking with the most popular version of this tale. So Mr. Cooley had actually ended up having a second son, and they lived longer than the newborn baby did. But his second son was actually stabbed to death by his personal servant. It's speculated that the second son had inherited the cursed drawer from his father, and not long before his death, he had placed some of his clothing in the drawers. Mr. Cooley even had a third son, named John, or Jonathan as I'd assume. There was no name for the second or the first son. Now, John had inherited his father's many plantations, and if you're unaware of what a plantation is, it's basically a farm that only grows a specific crop because it has the highest amount of value in it. So you're just trying to get the most profit possible by only selling one crop or a few different plantations of the highest bidding fruits or whatever it is that you're going to grow. But anyways, you get the point. So John had actually gotten married in his young life and was quite happy. Money was never a worry for him. He was in a rich family. The wife's name was said to have been Ellie. Now, because the pair married, Ellie technically inherited this chest drawer as well, because when you get married, everything, like, it comes together, doesn't it? You own whatever the other person owns legally. However, Ellie knew better. She had it put in an attic for a long time after knowing the history behind what's happened with it. So you're kind of getting a picture of how this piece of furniture keeps getting passed around. The couple had gone on to being very successful, having acquired multiple farms in Tennessee. Now, around the same time, Jacob Cooley's youngest daughter, Melinda, married an Irishman named Sean. Now, Sean actually had nowhere to live, so Melinda had helped Sean by turning to Ellie, her sister-in-law. They proposed the couple work on one of their farms and in return would have a place to live. As you can imagine, it was a tough life, one where even Melinda began having children and still having to work sunrise to sunset. Sean himself even became depressed and perhaps guilty for their hardship. Feeling bad, Ellie actually gifted them the set of drawers she'd left in the attic. Ellie thought that this would be okay because the drawers were put away for a while and nothing bad seemed to happen. She thought this would bring some light into their life. The reality was, Melinda, only in her 30s, became quite ill from all the work. Her energy was diminishing, she needed more rest, so her husband is said to have travelled to New Orleans to look for a better work opportunity for them. However, Melinda would actually pass away shortly after her husband left. Some tales of the folklore actually say that Sean had actually left her in hardship intentionally, not wanting the farm life anymore. We don't truly know why Sean left his wife while she was sick. But either way, the way I'm looking at it, like, Melinda is family. Yeah, you did give her shelter, but you're also making her work like an average person when you own the farms. And I know that, like, slavery was very prominent at the time. I'm not really too sure on my history, but was it really that prominent for white people to work, like in rich families then? Anyways, before Sean had left, both him and his wife would have been using those drawers, perhaps even putting their own clothes in them, because let's face it, you're not just going to get a set of drawers and just not use them, because what other use would there be for them in the first place? Now, if the curse truly does strike when personal possessions are put in the drawers, it may explain Melinda's illness. Eerily though, while Sean was traveling to New Orleans, he was struck in the head by a steamboat's gangplank and died as well, not even that long after his wife had died. So because both of the parents died, their children actually became orphans. Again, it's unknown how many children they actually had. It just doesn't say anywhere. It doesn't say how many were boys, what their ages were, how many were girls. We don't even have names for every child, so we're just gonna have to roll with what we've got here. So this actually left John Cooley assigning the children to other families to take care of them. However, while Mr. Cooley was finding families for the orphans, he decided he would take their youngest, Evelyn, to live with his own family back in Kentucky. So why he didn't choose all of them and prefer to separate them is unknown. It's not like they were a poor family, like he could have quite easily housed the children. But again, in these time periods, maybe they just didn't want the responsibility. Maybe in the 1800s it was just really normal to just separate family when tragedy happens. So Evelyn was actually very bright and got her teaching certificate at just 16 years old. Eventually Evelyn got married to a Scotsman. Now a Scotsman is just a man from Scotland in the UK. We've had an Irish man and a Scottish man already in one video. So as you can see, we're getting deeper and deeper into the family tree around Mr. Cooley. So anyways, the man Evelyn married was Malcolm Johnston. They had married not even 2 months after Evelyn's new teaching job. So as a wedding present, Ellie had gifted the dresser again to this couple. If things weren't even any worse, Ellie is gifting the exact same thing again. Like, I'm really wondering what was going through Ellie's mind at this point. Like, she locked it away in the attic for so long, and deaths continued after she gifted it prior to Evelyn, and she still is giving it out. So anyways, again, as couples do, they go on to having children. Evelyn had even adopted a young girl named Arabella. Now, the curse of the dresses seemed to have been forgotten about, as there were long periods of time, just nothing happening, you know. These were couples building a family, living life, etc., etc. Like, honestly, I feel like I'm in a loophole here, but get this. Arabella ends up getting married, and then she has children also. I know, shocking, who would have guessed? The circle of life. So Evelyn had put her wedding dress safe in the dresser after the marriage. I have no idea if they were using this dresser prior, probably were. But shortly after her mother did this, Arabella's husband died. She'd even put baby clothes in the dresser, and guess what? Arabella's baby died. There were also 3 other tragedies that befell on Evelyn's immediate family after. However, before the death of Malcolm, he was actually very successful. He'd actually been selling a native mammal from Scotland called the shrewd Scottish eye, and that became a booming business empire where he'd actually been able to build mills, a coal yard, wharf, and even a goods store. Now, Evelyn was left in a great financial situation because of her husband's businesses, but that didn't help her mentally due to losing her husband and her grandchild. Plus, she might have felt guilty because she was the one that put the clothes in the dresser. Like, after seeing all these deaths appear and appear and appear, she probably felt really guilty, like it was all her fault. So Evelyn was haunted by all the memories. It just got so much for her that she actually ended her own life. Now, this leaves Arabella with no husband, no child, and even though she was adopted by Evelyn, no mother either. She's lost all of the most important family that she could ever have. Imagine that. Just imagine that. It really is tragic, and it could explain a family curse. The chest of drawers were then inherited by Virginia Carey Hudson, who was actually skeptical of the curse. She was soon proven wrong when she herself put her first baby's clothes away in the dresser. Her baby died. Again, a pattern that has been happening through these generations of families. We don't need to keep going. This has happened basically 16 times. Generation from generation. However, Mrs. Hodgson was bold and wanted to end this curse, so she contacted an old friend who was African American named Annie. Now, Annie actually had a knowledge of curses and conjuring. Now, she went on to explain that the curse would be broken with 3 exceptions. Number 1, she would have to be given a dead owl by someone without even asking for it. So imagine the chances of that happening. It's like almost impossible, I guess you could say. Number 2, take green leaves from a willow tree and boil them from sun up to sundown, and the owl must remain in plain sight. Number 3, the boiled liquid must be buried in a jug with its handle facing east towards the rising sun below a flowering bush. It sounds like a tough video game objective, doesn't it? And if that doesn't make matters worse, Annie said that they would only know if this curse had lifted is if one of them died before the first full days of autumn, or fall, depending on what you call it. Annie died in early September, counting as the 17th victim to the dresser, the last known victim, and Annie was only trying to help, and that costed her entire life. So the final private owner of the conjure chest, that's what it's called by the way, was Mrs. Hudson's daughter, Virginia C. Main. Mrs. Main donated it to the Kentucky History Museum in 1976. So from 1840 to 1976. That's how long it took to get this piece of furniture in a museum. basically 130 years. So supposedly the curse has been removed, but tucked safely in the top drawer of the chest is an envelope containing owl feathers. They think that is going to help keep the curse away and at bay. So what do we think of this one? Reviewing cursed objects is always interesting, whether it's folklore related or not. Either way, it was a sinister backstory regardless. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and remember that we do have playlists on this channel, so if you're in a spooky mood, binge watch. We're not going to judge you, you know. We all are guilty of binge watching here and there. And yeah, I hope you join us in the next video. Subscribe if you haven't. I don't even think I've said that in one video yet. I don't think I've ever asked anyone to subscribe. But yeah, I'll see you soon. Till then, stay spooky.